Welcome to the channel where all you gotta do is make a transmission mount for this V10 68 Fastback Mustang. Well, there it is, in the hole. So I wanted to get this thing placed in here so I can make the transmission mounts for it. So that's its final resting position. The drive shaft is 1 inch off center from the center line of the vehicle. So that's how the transmission tunnel is designed. So kind of have to follow that unless I want to make a new transmission tunnel, which is fine. This is my cobbled job here to get more clearance. So that's good. I might need to put a little bump in there. See where that little Sharpie mark is? There's a sensor there that probably don't need. I'll have to look into what that sensor does. I might just delete it, but I might need it. So I may have to put a little bulge right there. It's no big deal. Just whittle something up and on the press form thing and work it in there. So I did decide I'm going to get rid of this as a mount, and I'm going to make my own mount that kind of comes through here and then saddles across there. The challenge to that is it's got to have clearance for the exhaust just like this guy does. Okay, so this is what I've come up with as far as a transmission mount. Originally this had like just a 3.5 inch divot in it to let the exhaust through, but I think I'm going to go with some either squish tubing or ovated tubing. Originally this was 2.5 inches across. I made it 2 5/8. Not a huge difference. And then I got counter bores on here, 2 8mm bolts. So the stock mounts, the stock rubber bushings fit into these little holes here. And yeah, so I wanted to make sure that this was stiff enough so it wasn't going to be like a NVH concerned. I don't want this thing bouncing up and down. So what you want to have is the bushings 1/10 or less as stiff as the structure. So I didn't do any super analytical calculations on it, but the rubber bushings are pretty soft and this is pretty stiff. I also didn't want it cantilevered, so I put one on each side of it, and that kind of lined up pretty good with where it's going to sit in the car. So as you can see here in the car, this is in its original final resting place. It's kind of right at the back of this original substructure for the frame. Putting air quotes if you can't hear them. So, and I jigged this up on the bench to make it so this thing is like, this is 2 inches longer here than it is here. So it's the center of the drive shaft is 1 inch offset. Okay, so you saw the motor mount or the transmission mount design. So these are the pieces I'm building for it. I made them the same length, 32 inches it happens to be, and then this little cutout. Do a little deburring here just to make sure that they were straight to each other. I clamped them together and flipped them around. Probably not the most time efficient way of doing this, but I have a mill and it's more accurate, so that's what I do. Anyway, so now I have to build little pieces to go in here to fill this up so it's not a, you know. So, and then I'll weld those in and then I'll come back and kind of kiss them, machine them up a little bit, make them perpendicular. And then I need to put a bolt here and here. Same thing on the other side, so I'll have to drill a hole in there and put a standpipe, so when you tighten the bolt up, it doesn't just crush this. And then I need to make the piece that sandwiches between the mounts. So this is like 2.5 inches, so I'm going to put 1 bar here and 1 bar here. And then the piece that is on 20-degree angle happens to be, we'll just span in between those two. Piece of 1/8 inch plate. And then we'll have a transmission mount. Okay, so I cut a piece of sheet metal, 1/8 inch thick to 8/12 wide, and then I put a bend in it there. So I'm going to chamfer this all the way around, and then I'll TIG weld that all up. I'm not going to try to bend this and this because the chance of me getting that, you know, correct is nil. Okay, so I got some whittling done on the transmission cross members. I decided to make 2 to make it stiff enough and kind of saddle around. And then I just made it out of really thin. It's only 3/32 wall tubing. It's a little heavier than I wanted it to be, but I want it to be nice and stiff. So, and then I just got it clamped in place right now. But I'm gonna put a doubler in here, weld that in. That threads will be in that, and then the holes will come through the bottom. They'll be countersunk into this. Okay, so I'm putting the pass-throughs. This is going to have a bolt going through the bottom into a plate inside the structure of the frame. So I drilled a hole in it on all of them. This little setup here. And then I'm going to flip this thing over and put a 3/4 inch counterbore in the bottom side. So this will go in there, like yonder. And I'm going to turn this guy in my lathe. So this is like a 600 thousandths diameter hole, just under 5/8. So I'm going to make a I'm going to make this smaller on the end here, so it fits through there. So even if the weld breaks, it's still holding it together. Not that my welds ever break, you know, they're pretty good. But and then this side has room enough to put a countersink bolt in it. I'm going to use this end mill here, which is about 550. This is like 520 head diameter. So that'll be sunk in and then won't be sticking out of the bottom, because the bottom of this is actually going to be where the under tray bolts. So that's the level of the under tray. And I made some plates to go on the inside, which I'll weld some nuts to. They're sitting right there. And those will just set down in the hole there. And I'll weld it on both ends and both sides. So that'll be the transmission mount. I got little slots in these guys now. As you know, slots are good. Okay, so finished making this little thing. It's turned down to that 600 diameter there. Got a chamfer on that side. So I'm just gonna press this in. Use my arbor press, but this is the same diameter here. It'll be a bit of a press fit. And then I got a chamfer on this side to weld on the part, and the chamfer on the insert on this side. And then after that's welded, I'll machine this guy flat on this surface, and then I'll drill the hole and put the counterbore in it, and we'll almost have a motor mount, transmission mount, some. Okay, so I got these guys all welded up. Don't worry about that blue. I like that color. It means I got some heat into it. I think that's what it means. I don't know. So I got these guys all machined. I just need to cut out a piece of sheet metal and weld it in each side there and there. And then I don't know if you might notice that that's not a circle, so I offset this hole saw cut and this hole saw cut by 1 inch. And I think I'm going to do the same thing up there. And that way I can take my 3-inch tube and just squish it a little bit, and then I'll have tons of room clearance wise. Okay, so I got one of these guys welded up. Not so much that one or that one, but that one. So basically what I did, I just got a piece of same material thickness, kind of bent it over a edge of the table, and then I kind of centered it in there like that there, and I tack welded it here in the middle. It won't stay there for me. Anyway, trust me, that's what I did. And then I just clamped it or bonked it with a hammer until it was the shape of the rest of the stuff, and I welded it in. Now when you do that, this thing is it's gonna pull on you, right? You're putting all this heat into this arc here, and when that shrinks, it's gonna lift this side up. So there's a couple things you can do about that. You can clamp it to the table and weld it, which will not completely fix it, but it'll make it less. Or you can clamp it to a big giant pipe or whatever. It's still going to pull though. There's going to be some internal stresses in there. So what I did is I just finished welding this. It was still hot, and then I just went over to the vise, stuck this in the vise and pulled on it until it's straight. It's still hot and malleable. So anyway, I'll get this thing. I'll get the rest of these welded up actually, and then once these are all cooled off, I'll hit it with the old flap disc and kind of clean that stuff up. Got these things all cleaned up, spiffified, ready for paint. And I got these things knocked up at 20 degrees. Got my angulometer here. Something like that. And the center line distance I got correct. So now I'm going to sparkleize these in. I'll just put a little tack here and here, here and here. And make sure that fits in good. I got this thing spaced out with a 5/8 shank end mill and a 1-2-3 block. So that's 2 5/8 inches apart. And I got my yo-yo here so I can get that thing centered. Well, not centered, off-centered 1 inch. So there it is in the hole. Still needs a little paint job. And I drilled the holes in here. You can see there's a bolt in there. Same thing on the other side. And then I made some plates here. Muy caliente still. So that'll sit inside the frame rail. And I'll put a couple of tack welds so it doesn't fall out, but it'll just sit inside of there, and that'll be essentially a nut plate. Well, there you have it. I have a cross member and a transmission with some clearance. I did put these mounts as far down as possible. And the reason I did that was if I don't want these sticking out of the bottom, which they don't, so that's perfect. But if I want to raise it up, I can just put a spacer in here and raise it up. And then if I would have welded it all together in the higher position, then I want to lower it, and then now I'm in trouble, right? But I think this radius is slightly bigger than this radius. Damn it! I start over. Anyway, it's yeah, no strings. It's like really holding that transmission up. So, yeah. Coming up, motor mounts. Maybe a shifter. Thanks for watching. If you like this content and want more, subscribe, like, and share.